Harry Enfield.
Yeah, kind of. Not that, not that.
Queuing up to get in.
And the very
I think they're trying to leave some space for.
Quarterback, quarterback.
Kind of will sit in the front, so you get to see.
No, you can't see the front.
He could sit on the floor at the back and still be able to see
He
everyone.
is, he's kneeling.
Not that I'm not naturally short,
because
it's
it's
Yeah, but you got the comfy chair.
So that's,
absolutely.
No, I'm not complaining. It's fine.
It's a great chair.
so it's both a sales and a procurement technique. Put the person opposite in a smaller chair. Yeah, oh god, yeah, and the light shining in her eyes.
We need to do some business together. Listen, now.
What is heckle? We love hecklers.
Carrot.
I've got some questions.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Oh,
don't
carrot.
throw
We're
your
still waiting
wine
for
on
carrot.
us. We are really at the front.
You come and sit up here, actually. You don't like
You can sit on the little stool. We'll let you.
Is this being videoed?
Yes. But come back there.
Where's makeup?
So you're not, and they're sure still not going to see my short butt.
Yeah, Jess might be blocking the camera.
That's fabulous. I'm good with that, Jess. Stay right where
Am I
you are.
blocking?
No. Stay right where you are. All right, we ready to start?
Okay, Angie, take it away.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. We really appreciate you being here. I'm Angie Smith. I'm the partner manager for Cloud Reach, and I'll be moderating tonight. So I'm going to let the guys all introduce themselves and kind of give their title and let you know, and then we'll start with some panel questions, and then we would love to hear some interaction and questions from you guys as we go along, okay?
Okay, so my name is Andre Azevedo. I've been at Cloud Reach for around 4 years and been running our global sales team for 18 months or so now. So people dotted around the globe in the US and around Europe as well.
Patrick Wynn. I'm the procurement director at the Telegraph. So I've been there 8 years. Before that, I was at Sky for 7 years. So I tend to do technology procurement. So for my sins, I have to deal with Andre quite often. So looking forward to tonight.
Dan Webb, I head up sales for Logic in the UK. Worked for a number of other technology vendors prior to that. I've been in the IT security industry for about 14 years, so I know what you're thinking, but I have a really good skincare regime.
That was not my first thought, but thank you for letting us know.
Don't lie.
That's question number 3.
Yeah.
All right, so since you're so funny, Dan, we'll start with you. So,
Walked into that one, didn't I?
all right, Dan. So you guys sell a really pretty complex and specific threat management tool at Alert Logic. So how do you educate your customers on business value of the solution without losing the attention of the executives that you're speaking with?
Yeah, good question. So I think, certainly historically for other security companies I worked for, that was a bit more challenging, but the way that we do things is slightly different and it's quite outcome focused. So that kind of gives us a bit of a head start. But I think, for me, the key with that really is making it relevant to the person you're speaking to and really kind of understanding their motivation for talking to you in the first place. If you're talking to a CFO, ultimately they're going to want to understand what the cost benefits are going to be to them or how they can drive some efficiency. If you're talking to a CTO, it's probably going to be more about how this is going to help them innovate and what kind of benefits you can bring on that side. So it's really about trying to map the capability that you're talking about to an outcome that's positive for that individual rather than doing, I guess, what a lot of salespeople do and kind of just tunneling in on what we do that's great and not really thinking about whether it's relevant. So I guess that's the kind of rule of thumb. And you can obviously be a bit creative with that once you kind of have confidence in understanding how you map to various different business challenges and different approaches.
Gotcha. Okay. So Pat, as a director of procurement, so you and your sales team get pitched
My sales team?
all the time. So what do you find are pitches that work versus those that do not?
I always find that if people come in and they understand, they've got some background around what the Telegraph does, and they also have quite a good idea of what's happening within the media industry, the publishing industry, and they understand the challenges that the publishing industry is going through, and they've actually got good solutions that are going to help us meet those challenges, then they're the sort of things that sell themselves. So you don't need a fantastic salesman to do that. You just need to help us be better. So.
Good answer. Okay, Andre. So your background is in large corporates, such as like SAP, Oracle, those type. When you joined CloudReach, its brand wasn't as big as it is at this point. So what are the main differences in selling in those two different types of environments?
Yeah, so I guess there's loads of differences, I suppose, from working with a big brand. So I spent a lot of time at SAP, and some time at Oracle before then. And obviously, when you call with that big brand, people will usually pick up the phone to you. It's a little bit easier to get into conversations with the big brand. When you come to a company like CloudReach, and especially when I joined 4 years ago, with a much smaller organization, our clout, let's say, in the cloud industry wasn't as big as it is today, where I think is a little bit easier for us these days. You have to lean on what back to Dan's point, on what benefits can you bring to the customer, and obviously leaning on the big brands you partner with at CloudReach, like we partner with Amazon and Microsoft and Google, and then people like AlertLogic to complement the solution. Is all about leaning on those big brands that people do know, and how you can bring the innovation they bring and transform into something useful for the customer. Another thing that I guess I was lucky enough. SAP is a very hated company a lot around the world, mainly because users don't like to use software, and they always moan about the software they use. But one thing I learned while I was there, and I think that I bring to what I do right now, and again is a bit related to Dan's point, is at SAP I would never speak or never talk about the actual solution, the actual software. The software is not a prodigy in terms of what it is, and it's not something you want to talk about. What you want to talk about is how they can transform their business by using this piece of software. So again, focusing on the outcomes, focusing on what you can bring to the customer, that's how you get the attention. So I think that's something I learned from my past life that I could bring into CloudReach. Again, it's easy to get to focus on technical details, but you need to focus on the outcomes and what you bring to the customer.
I think the kind of flip side of that is, I worked for EMC for a few years, and sometimes not having a brand can be a good thing because there's no kind of preconception too, right? And like the kind of reputation of EMC was as being a particularly kind of aggressive sales organisation. So I mean, you've probably seen this. Probably vendors you don't particularly like working with because some guy's going to turn up and try and kind of beat you over the head with whatever it is he's trying to sell you, and use some sort of dirty tricks and whatever else to try and convince you. Or if you've already kind of invested in a technology stack, and they're going to come and see you 3 years later and tell you it's all redundant now and you need to buy another one. So sometimes having that clean slate is actually a great opportunity for you to kind of say, well, let's challenge the status quo. There's a reason we're not kind of validated by whoever as being the kind of leader in our space, because we're still growing on our journey, but that doesn't mean we're not doing it better. So kind of got to have the balls to do that in the first place, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. Okay, so we're kind of talking about how do you get in with the C-suite, how do you talk to them, how do you message to them. So people always say that you have to hit the C-suite. Is that always the best approach? And before that, what does C-suite mean for you guys and how you actually sell? So anybody can take it. Go for it, Andre.
So I think there's a few questions there, right? So if you say, is it always the right approach? I think where you begin, you might begin lower down let's say the food chain, and work your way up to talk to the C-suite, or the other way around. I think the way you do it will depend on the solution you sell, even the conversations you can even get to. I guess the point about you always have to end up dealing with the C-suite for 2 reasons. One is not that many people, Pat can confirm this, he's working with some large organizations, not that many people in organizations can actually spend money. Although they say they can, but there's not that many people that can actually spend money in organizations. So if you're selling something to someone that's lower down the food chain, you will leave it to chance. If you only talk to this person and you rely on that person to then go and sell it internally to the person that actually signs the check, that the person is authorized to spend the money, you sort of leave it to chance. You can still be successful, you can still sell, but you leave it to chance. So you have to make sure that the person you're talking to understands why you need, executive engagement at organizations. And if you start lower, you need to bring them and, also make sure that person is painted in a good light if they bring you to the C-suite. So you also need to bring value to that person. You always make sure they understand you're going to bring value to the C-suite. And I think yeah, the way you get there, it really depends. But I think that you need to get there if you don't want to leave your chances of winning to chance.
I find it's rare to start there though. Certainly, sorry, Jen.
You
Go
will
on.
be, sorry. I do have a question.
Okay.
Thank you. Pat, it's actually for you. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer to have solutions that are brought to you from the teams that are below you, and then it's brought to you to then say yes or no, or do you prefer to have the solutions brought to you first, and then you will send it on to your teams?
I mean, I think it's horses for courses. So I find sort of with technology buying that, I work very closely with the CIO. I mean, he has been my boss for the last X number of years, but most of the solutions that come across my desk are actually bottom up rather than top down. So I sort of agree with Andre there that from a sales perspective, I think you do have to get in at those people who actually understand the technology, because if you're going in front of the CFO, he hasn't got a clue what you're talking about, and then actually working with them to get a valid business case put together that we'll actually convert it into CFO speak in terms of, this is how much it's going to cost, but this is what it's going to do in terms of either cost reduction in other areas, income generation, risk reduction, etc. So I would actually say starting at the C-suite is, certainly at the Telegraph and even at Sky, is the wrong place to start. So.
And it's just, I was going to say, it's just difficult to do that in the first place. Right?
Yeah,
I think having a relevant, meaningful subject to discuss with somebody in the C-suite from the get-go is usually pretty difficult, right? You kind of need, certainly from my experience, a little bit of context about what that business is doing, and some views from the inside as to where they are from a current state perspective before you're going to go and have a meaningful conversation there. So, I mean, unless you've got some great personal relationships that you can lean on, where maybe somebody's making a warm introduction and saying, I went to school with this guy, go and have a beer and see if you can kind of build some relationship. But then you're usually going to get passed back down anyway, right? It's usually going to be more of a kind of validated position, like I've sounded this guy out, he's not a snake oil salesman, go and speak to my head of operations or my whatever else it might be.
I guess that's exactly the point. We as CloudReach, we do, as we all know, people that here that work for CloudReach, we do get introduced to a lot of senior people at organizations. But what happens is exactly that. They say, okay, fine, I can see what you stand for, but then go and work the details with these people, and then it comes back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I guess, of course, having the CIO or the CTO, I'm not saying is a negative thing. If they have the CIO or the CTO endorsing you to someone down below, say go and talk to these guys, it's obviously a big endorsement. They're not going to ignore it, right? But it doesn't really solve, as Pat says, it doesn't really get you any far unless you prove your value to the people that actually understand the solutions and then bring it back.
I think the other point you're making about kind of who owns the budgets and everything else, right? I think people do get a bit fixated with, I have to get into the kind of big exec suite or whatever. And I think you've got so many kind of C-level roles these days as well. It's about understanding which of those actually matter. And I mean, you could be chief whatever officer, right? I mean, there's all kinds of different titles that get thrown about. It's who actually, when you kind of look up the reporting line, is going to be making these decisions. Otherwise, you'll just end up with a bunch of guys kind of passing you around for their own agenda. I think so.
Right.
Oh,
We've got a question at the back.
There are also some examples where you can buy the trust of the C-suite and the full C-suite and fail miserably. And I faced that, like this was blessed to go all into the cloud with the customer, which happened to be Intrum. all his first line leadership team was on board, everyone was ready to go, the goal was to get 80% into the cloud, and this failed because they didn't think about getting the adoption from the, you know,
Yep.
Yeah,
the
that's a
base,
great point.
and explain to them that this was not a threat, but this was an opportunity to
Mm.
work differently, to be more efficient, to, you know, to
Yeah.
do that internal marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
totally.
net result, 2 years later, they moved probably 15%.
Yeah, look, we've at CloudReach, we've seen that time and time again. Where
It's
yeah,
my vision.
the CIO is bought into this, but you know, if you don't engage, but again, and we in this space, I want to believe that we actually provide a good service and can actually make it happen. But it's always goes back to the value I think Pat was talking about earlier, which is if the CIO likes whether they meet from your company, that's really good. They endorse you to go and talk to someone. But if your solution is not really relevant or doesn't solve any problems or save any money or enable the customer to innovate, you won't succeed anyway. So you can talk to the C-suite as much as you like, but you have to have something to offer. So and back to that point, it's sort of a similar concept. You have to convince the people underneath that it is the right thing to do.
So it's both.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's something we're going to
Bottom
talk
up
about
and top down.
further down, but kind of bottom up, top down. You kind of need a balance, right? It can't be too heavily weighted in either of those ends of the scale.
Yeah. I think another thing to recognise is obviously that those people at that C-suite level are competing for the company resources. So you might actually do a good sales job on the CIO. He goes to the CFO and says, right, I've got this great idea. And the CFO says, well, actually, I've only got this amount of money. I've got another great idea from the chief marketing officer and one from a...
They always win.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's not even just, sort of getting your favourite C-suite person to go and talk to the finance bods. There's competition at the top as well.
And never let a CISO go and talk to anybody for you. They'll just
No.
confuse the hell out of everybody. That's all
Yeah, we've
they're
just
good
got
for.
one starting in a couple of weeks. So
Yeah, I'll give you a translator if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan, lots of questions come up around getting the
There's
attention of an
another,
executive.
sorry, there's
Oh,
another
I'm
question
sorry,
at the
I
back.
missed-
Was there another question?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I missed your name at the start, but it's
Pat.
Bob. So.
Pat. So Pat, from a sales point of view, I understand procurement teams are gold on saving organisations money. Ultimately, that's one of their key purposes.
That's the only thing we're tasked with. Yeah, so.
Good, nice. Yeah. But so in terms of a salesperson coming to you, what does a salesperson really need to do to make your team's life as easy as possible, apart from giving the cheapest price possible?
It's not even necessarily about the cheapest price, to be honest. If we go out on a tender basis, there's a whole team looking at that tender in terms of what's the best solution, and that best solution might not be the cheapest price. So there's a lot of considerations around that. But if you can come in and you've got a solution that might actually cost a fair bit of money, but in other areas within the company it can take out cost because you're replacing something else that we currently have which doesn't do the job or which costs too much to do it, then that they're the sort of things I'd be looking for. As I've said at the start, how can you help us to achieve our goals, which is not just cost reduction on that particular piece of software or that particular technology, is cost reduction across the whole company. So that's the sort of focus I'd be looking at.
Perfect. Cool. Okay, so Dan, lots of questions come up around getting the attention of an executive.
Mhm.
So what messages do the C-level care about? What do they want to hear?
Yeah, I think again, sort of back to the point I made at the start, it's got to be relevant to whatever their kind of objectives are, right? And it's not always particularly easy to establish what those objectives are, And this is again kind of back to my point about trying to. I always like to have a champion somewhere else in the business before I go into that room with somebody who's kind of up the stack, so that I've got at least some understanding of where their head's at before I go into that room. Because otherwise, these guys are busy, as you said, they're fighting kind of for resources with internal politics and everything else, and walking in there uneducated is going to go very, very badly. So I think if you've got something truly relevant to them and to some degree a kind of innovative and interesting approach, then you've got a chance, right? It's about making it something that they feel is worth prioritising over the millions of other things that they've got to do. I think, you know, there's no magic formula, there's no kind of gimmick. It's just, you know, what are you trying to achieve and how can I help you get there? And be honest too, right? Don't pretend that you've got a solution if you don't, right? And I think that's another thing that, you know, people can tend to do. They just think they have to get validation from this part of the house, but they don't understand how they're going to help that person with their challenges, and that can end up with the whole kind of sales campaign just going up in smoke if you've done that. Right? You can get the reverse of the validation you're looking for, and actually get the kind of, yeah, when I work with this guy, he's a complete cowboy kind of.
Right. So Pat, going on the back of that, how do you spot when people aren't authentic and just talking the talk and not really knowing what they're speaking about?
I suppose if they come in and say I'm a salesman, there's normally the. Sorry.
We had a fiver on that one coming up.
Yeah, well done. I think from a procurement perspective, and it's quite difficult, but people don't normally get to me unless, you know, they have had the conversation with one of the technical guys who can actually validate what they're talking about, you know. And if they do get to me first, then that's all I'm going to do is push them back. I don't make the decisions. You know, it's the technical guys who will say, right, okay, this solution is actually going to do this, that, and the other for us. And then I will sort of say, right, okay, that's a great solution. Who else is out there that can actually provide this solution? Do we need to actually look at, you know, whether this is of sufficient magnitude in terms of spend and time and our own internal resources, that we actually might need to go out to market and look at other solutions for that. So I think technology salesmen can probably come in and talk the hind legs off me, and I'll be like, yeah, sounds fantastic, let me go and talk to someone else, and then just sort of get back to them if it's, you know, something that's relevant and something that is actually or does what these sales guys actually say it does.
Yeah, look, if I want to, I know obviously I don't speak for you, but you can probably validate what I'm going to say, which is one of the things I ask of our team at CloudReach is be knowledgeable about everything you do, and, you know, if it is knowing some of the technical details, you should go and learn them. If it's knowing about how we contract and how we, you know, what's important for us from a contractual perspective and what isn't, you know, from a discount perspective, etc. And even if sometimes you don't need to use it all the time, because if you talk to the C-suite, you don't need to talk about the details. But when you talk to the guys below, you need to talk about that. And you also always try not to be just a relationship guy, and try to be knowledgeable, because those interactions then, you know, with Pat from a procurement perspective, from a contractual perspective, through to the people in the technical teams, will make you a lot more credible, and they will pick up the phone to you rather than your technical guy, right? So, you know, being knowledgeable is something that's really, really important. I'm not sure if you feel that, but, you know, sitting in front of someone that doesn't know what they're talking about is must be very annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you said. If you're trying to sell something that, you know, is not going to do what you're saying it's going to do, then, you know, you really are shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah.
But that is the difference, I think. You know, you were kind of talking about being knowledgeable and, you know, having subject matter expertise. There's a difference between that and just being dishonest, right? And I think there is, you know, I mean, the IT security industry that I'm from is probably, you know, from a technology perspective, right up there in the kind of bullshit stakes, right? You know, I'll be honest, it has been for a long time, you know, because it's a lot of what you're talking about isn't tangible. You're kind of talking about a threat that exists out there, right? That threat has had a few different flavours over the years, you know. 3 years ago, everyone was concerned it was the Chinese, and then it was the Russians, and then, you know, there's always some boogeyman. No, it's true, right? It's, you know, people marketed like that out there. So, you know, your technology guys are probably getting somebody turn up and say, you know, there's been a whole bunch of Chinese nation state sponsored attacks on media companies. You need to buy this box because this box is going to make sure that doesn't happen to you. But actually, that box is just going to be a box, and there's a whole bunch of other things that need to happen for that to happen. So it's like,
you saying I bought the wrong box then?
You bought the wrong box. You bought the Russian box. Yeah, you needed the Chinese box. You got the wrong one. No, but, you know, genuinely, there's a difference between selling a a solution genuinely and selling a component of a solution and being honest enough to be able to say to a customer, you know, actually there's a whole bunch of other stuff you're going to have to do to make this work for you as well. So there's that kind of level of integrity in your work that you know no one ever gets a second chance if you sell something that goes spectacularly wrong. Whereas if you sell something that maybe doesn't quite deliver the expectations, but you're kind of honest about it, you're more likely to get a bit of leeway, right? Or
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you can point out the pitfalls of, you know, this is where we've seen it go really well, this is where we've seen it go really badly, we're gonna, you know, sort of make sure or try to make sure it doesn't go badly. But you know, we do need your buy-in as a company, you know, because it's actually very easy for people to come in and sell something, and then we just don't have the resources in house to actually assist with doing it properly, you know, and it's all on
drive-by selling, we call that.
Yeah,
So.
and it's all on top of their day jobs, and you know, everyone sort of rebels against, oh, here's another solution that I've got to implement while I'm trying to keep last week's solution up and running. So need to bear that in mind.
Yes, Darren.
So Andre or Dan, you get a meeting with the CIO. How do you structure that meeting? What are your desired outcomes, and how do you make sure you achieve those desired outcomes?
Well, I can go first. I think, look, I think we're sounding like broken records, but because I think we keep saying the same things in different ways. But I think that is a good question. Back to, so if you have that champion, if you have that information, you need to know what the goals of that person or that function are. Then you can prepare to say, do I, even again being honest with yourself, do I have something that addresses those goals, right? Can I bring something of value that addresses those goals? And I think one of the things that we always talk about internally, and you know, this comes from a book that if you guys have read, called The Challenger Sale, where they say that you know, the people that the most successful salespeople are people that do teaching. So people that go and talk to, and it doesn't need to be this C-level exec. Anyone you go and talk to, you try and bring something new to them that they know they can't get from someone else. So you either bring industry trends or bring what other people are doing in the industry. Going back to Pat's point around, you know, I understand media because I worked with News UK and I work with the FT. Therefore, when I go and speak to the Telegraph, these are the trends you can see in the industry. And if you do that teaching, it builds the credibility. You can say, I've done something similar to another customer that can bring the same value to you. You know, and it's all about how can I, you know, help this person achieve those goals. And if you prepare, if you know that information, then you know that's the recipe for success.
I mean, the only thing I'd add is just you know, whether it's a CIO or anybody at that kind of level, I think make sure that you're really well prepared, and that if you need to, that you're pulling on other resources in the business too, right? The worst thing you do is you kind of walk in there on your own and expect to have the answers to all their questions. It's usually good to understand if there's going to be other people that you might need to support you, whether it's from a credibility perspective, whether it's from a sort of subject matter perspective, you know. It's good to make sure you're not setting yourselves up for failure.
And I suppose the other thing there is going back to that. If you do go in and you do get asked questions and you don't know the answer, you know, you just say, yeah, I'll get back to you with that, rather than trying to bullshit your way through it. And sort of, you as a salesperson, I've seen it happen so many times. You know, they get a question that they don't know and they just go off on a complete tangent, never answer the question, and it sort of blows it for them and sort of blows it for me on my side.
You've just lost half the room now.
Move on. Yeah.
So I guess just the other part of the question is, what would your desired outcome be? You must go into that meeting thinking, a successful meeting for me looks like, you know, X, Y, and Z at the end of it.
I mean, I guess it varies, right? If you've got a very specific agenda there, then you know you're going to be have something in mind. I mean, usually if it is at that level, it's usually either kind of you're looking for some validation or you're looking for, you know, confirmation that whatever it is that you're trying to do lower down the chain is real and that somebody ultimately is going to pay for it at the other end. So I think, you know, I think it's as important to understand what they're trying to get out of it and not just kind of make it a one-way street and sort of walk in there and be like, I need to leave here with these two things. You know, why are they giving you the time of day in the first place, and what can you do to make sure that it's not the last meeting you have with that person, right? You know, are there things that you can take on for them? I always find as well that you know, stepping outside of the kind of immediate requirement you're trying to solve, whatever, and actually thinking about the individual and what's in it for them. You know, if they're a new chief digital officer that's coming to the business and he's going to basically transform the organisation at the expense of half the IT organisation, right? That's a lot of pressure. That's going to be a very interesting political landscape for them. You know, what are you going to do to help them be a success so that it doesn't fall flat on their face and you know they end up kind of failing. So you know, try and think about the personal objectives of the person that you're talking to as well.
And also, I think it goes back to you know, what stage are you in the engagement with the customer, right? So for you, so I can be meeting a CIO after I've done a lot of work. Not when I say I, it's the I mean
someone else has done a lot of work. Yeah.
I mean, our both organisations have been working together for a long time, working on a proposal on a big project. And the meeting with CIO could be just the validation where the CIO wants to talk to us to say, who are these guys? Are these guys,
eyeball you?
You know, are these guys the right people to buy from? And you know, we already done this work, you know, so you can sort of explain, this is what we're going to do, this is how much it's going to cost you. Let's just get that sort of almost the handshake on a deal, and that could be the outcome. But it could also be, you know, the first time we meet that CIO, first time we meet that organization, and we actually get to speak to the CIO. And what we want to do is to say, right, the agenda of that meeting should say, I want to get out of what I want to get out of this meeting. Could be, you know, not always, but it could be, I want him to endorse me to some of his teams to go and talk about a specific project or challenges they might have. And at that point, you say, fine, what I need to do is to, you know, teach them something he doesn't know. Could be you know, inspiring to do something different, or to, you know, inspiring about the cloud in our case. You know, this is what the cloud does, this is what cloud is doing for other organizations, and inspire him to or her to then recommend this to the rest of the business. I think depending on what stage you are in the engagement with the customer, I think the goals will be different as well.
I suppose the other thing just to note is that most C-suite people, and me, and I think anyone who's on the other side of a sales pitch, you come in armed with 70 slides. Yeah, don't bother. Yeah, because I'll always say, can you just go to the one with the costs in it? And, yeah. So yeah, be mindful of your audience in terms of what you're trying to tell them and how long it's going to take to tell them. So.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so Pat, you were talking about that you typically get things brought to you that come from somebody below you, which we call kind of a gatekeeper. So what's the best tactic to get around that gatekeeper and get to you?
He's not drunk enough for that yet.
Yeah.
Couple more drinks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Beer and pizza, that's the best.
I come in a meeting at 10:30 on Tuesday morning. Is that right?
What's the best tactic?
Not with Pat. No chance.
Yeah. What's the best tactic? I don't know. I mean, I'll reveal one of my things is that you know, my phone rings, my desk phone rings. I'll answer it and I'll just say, "Hello, it's Pat Wynn's phone." So and they say, "Oh, is Pat there?" And I say, "I don't know. I'll have a look. Who's calling and what do you want?" So if it's someone who's got something that might be of interest, then I'll actually say, all right, okay, it is me, and I'll talk to them. But
that's a nice icebreaker.
yeah, it is. But
you do that internally as well.
Hello, it's Pat. Yeah. But if not, I'll put them on hold for about 1 minute, and then come back and say, no, he's not here. So
how many times does that happen, Jess?
All the time.
Yeah.
Usually catch him out. It's fine.
That's done.
What, 7 Up?
Yeah. But yeah, I can't answer that question, to be honest, because you know, it doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work. Or if it does, you know, I'm having a bad day. So yeah, catch me on a bad day. That's the best way to do it.
All right, so we've talked about that.
I'll think about it a bit more.
Okay, we'll come back to that at the end.
Yeah.
What's a bad day?
Which day specifically?
When Pat picks up the phone to loads of salespeople.
Yeah. Well, the day after Man U have been beaten, so yeah.
When Andre calls, that's the bad day.
Before we move on, Pat, quick question. How many people ask you what your process is? So as a sales guy, when you get into that stage where you're dealing with procurement, I feel like a lot of times we try to push our time schedule
Mm.
onto the customer. And I'm interested to understand how many people actually ask you what the process is instead of just assuming what it might be. I mean, and if they did, how much of that could you or would you share?
Um, just thinking about it, it's probably 50-50. There are some people, particularly as you get further down the chain, further down the line in terms of a potential sale. Um, you know, the good salesman will ask, "What is the process?" Because obviously they'll be thinking in the back of their mind, it's quarter end coming up or year end or whatever. So, if he's going to tell me it's a 6 week process, and here we are, the 14th, 15th of September, and my quarter end's coming up, then I'm blown out the water. But if I am asked, I do actually tell them end to end what the process is, because I don't think there's any reason to hide that, and it sets their expectations as well. So we can shortcut the process if the deal on the table is so good, or if the CIO is saying I need to get on with this project, PDQ. So I would actually say that's a good question to ask of any procurement person, is to understand what the process is and how long it actually might take.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so we talk about the salespeople tout a lot that they have like C-level contacts and such as that. So we talked about that's not necessarily the right way to go, that you usually want to go at different levels. So is there a specific level that typically will work better than others? What is that level that really is the good one to focus on if it's not the C-level?
Well, what I've said is that it depends. It's from organisation to organisation, I suppose. You know, some organizations, we deal with organizations, large oil and gas companies. They've got like, I don't know how many people. They're all directors of something or VPs of something, or and it's difficult to navigate who can actually, make decisions that you can't. And obviously, you need to influence everyone. You deal with other organizations that are a little bit flatter, a little bit more straightforward. This is the C level. These are the guys that actually look at solutions, and obviously there's, from a technical perspective, from a cloud reach perspective, there's probably engineers that validate what we're doing. There's someone that some sort of architecture position that says, okay, this at the high level looks good, and then the C level buys it. But it really depends on what the size of the organization. I don't think it is. There's a one
Well, and
size
the
fits
products,
all.
right? So,
And the
so
products
as an
itself.
example, I mean, to an extent, we both sell solutions that are an alternative to running your own internal infrastructure, for example. So if you're starting a conversation in IT operations about outsourcing IT operations, probably not a good place to be, right? You're kind of asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. It's not really a good idea. So knowing your solution, knowing who it's valuable to, and then starting probably where you're most likely to get a champion somewhere. Now, ultimately, if you're going to have to talk to those guys, you want it to be at the point where the business has decided and they're telling them what's happening, and you're just kind of in there to soften the blow a little bit, right? So it's about kind of knowing, I guess, where you're going to see a door slam in your face first, and not starting there.
Okay, so more executives now are getting on board with the social media. So, in your opinion, for any of you guys, all of you guys, does LinkedIn, Twitter, do those things actually work for your sales team?
I use LinkedIn a lot, and we do as a team. I'm not allowed on Twitter. It's just a terrible idea.
To contact people or to research?
LinkedIn, yeah, just in general, bad idea. But Twitter, LinkedIn's great. So we use LinkedIn a lot.
But to research or to contact, to actually reach out to people?
Both. I think again, you've got a relevant story message for somebody. There's nothing that hurts. I mean, one thing I would say, really important to note, the C-level guys typically don't like over communication, don't over elaborate. Nice punchy short, paragraph of something that might be relevant to them, and if they're interested, they'll probably get back to you. If you write them a 75 paragraph, dissertation on your product, they're not going to read that. So keep it short, sweet, relevant. We've had great success with it. I mean, certainly when we've had, for example, like an event coming up or something along those lines, just dropping a note to a CIO or a CTO to say this is coming up. I thought it might be relevant. Have a look. Nice and simple.
Yeah.
Can work quite well.
I guess what works is being, I'd say, less as non-salesy as possible. But I guess not only just let's make sure the message is non-salesy. You have to be genuine. It has to be, as Dan says, look, there's an event about security. You should be interested in this, or you may have want to look at this, and if you don't, fine. But I think on Twitter and other social media and CloudReach, we are improving the way we do. I'm also responsible for that area, so I'll take responsibility. But we are improving on that. But I think social media should be used also as a channel of thought leadership, and actually not so much selling anything to anyone, but actually showing the world how innovative your company is. How are you changing the world by doing work with some companies? How are you actually improving the Telegraph's efficiency by the use of cloud platforms, etc. So is it, talking about those things, not selling anything, but generating thought leadership in the market is what works really, I think, really well in social media, because that's what executives want to read what's out there and what people are doing too.
So a little tactic that on those lines. So say for example there was a CISO that I wanted to kind of communicate with. I wouldn't just sort of get the connection and then dive straight in. I'd probably share a couple of things I thought might be interesting to them before I do that. So kind of preparing them for the fact that you're probably quite credible, you know what you're talking about. There's no guarantee they've seen it, but at least if you kind of think along those lines and don't, 10 seconds after they've accepted your connection, pitch them or something, I think it's, show them that there's some intent there for you to kind of build that kind of trust or eminence, or whatever you want to call it.
How do you feel about that, Pat? Do you actually take those kinds of communications as credible?
It depends what message is in them. So, I sort of get LinkedIn messages, people trying to sell things, and some of them, as you say, if it's a short, sharp, punchy, I've noticed that within the media industry there's this going on, then I'll actually forward that on to what might be the relevant people to have a look at it, to say, is this a solution that, solves any of our problems or not. I suppose the other thing to say is that, the CFO, he sort of tends to get LinkedIn messages and passes them on to me for some reason.
Why not?
And not to actually do anything with them other than to go back to that person and say, can you please stop contacting the CFO directly, come through me. So yeah, but as it's gone to his LinkedIn account, I can't actually do too much with it. But
what's the best one you've ever seen? Have you seen any really ridiculous ones? People offering you gold Rolexes or anything like that?
Not yet, no.
Just trying to work out how we can start this relationship.
Yeah.
How much do you need to offer?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think most of them are just as bad as the last one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it is becoming more prevalent as a way of trying to get in, but going back to what we've said all along, it has to be relevant, So if it's relevant, then it might go somewhere other than the trash.
Perfect. So, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So can you elaborate on what you call relevant?
I think one of the big selling points for any company trying to get into the Telegraph is if they're actually working with other newspaper organisations. So if they're working with News UK, if they're working with The Guardian, if they're working for the Mail, then that's half a foot in the door if they've got a solution that is relevant to publishing industry. It's the only reason Andre got through the door, really.
That's it. It's never because of me, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the first. It'll always be the first message. No, I would assume any industry you're in is we are currently working with blah 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 in your industry, doing great things for them. We'd really like to come and talk to you about what we're doing for them that might be able to help you. So.
Perfect. Okay, so after there's been an executive meeting, so this would be for Andre and Dan first. What kind of follow-ups do you advise your teams to do to further the deal along? I mean, how do you really keep that door open with an executive?
I guess it kind of depends on the context of the meeting. I mean, I'll start with a kind of a lesson learned, I guess. So this whole kind of concept of executive sponsorship, where you kind of pull an exec from your business in and you get an exec on the other side and you try and pair them up. Make sure you're getting the right people together in the room, because that can go horribly wrong. I've seen that, where you get an exec from your business who's completely out of sync with what the person you're meeting is interested in, and takes absolutely zero interest in following up on any of the actions. What you basically then get is kind of 2 months of embarrassment when the exec you've met is going, when am I going to get my follow up from your CTO, your whoever else it might be. So make sure that you're going into the meeting kind of with a clear agenda, I guess again, just all down to don't overdo it. Don't, you know, if you've got agreed some actions, make sure you're prompting that you actually do what you say you're going to do, and try and make sure that you then don't, you know, spill over into a whole load of irrelevant activity off the back of it. You know, keep it sort of concise in your engagement and make sure it's valuable at all times. I think, you know, generally just keeping that level kind of aware of the process that you're working through is probably a good thing to do, and you know, maybe don't go too much deeper than that. There's people that you'll probably be doing the doing with, if you like, and you know, just kind of filtering information up to them to say, by the way, you know, the last 3 weeks, this is what's happened since we met, you know, and if there are potential things that you think they can influence, and you know, maybe ask them. But I mean, I think they probably would rather be involved in doing things that could have a benefit rather than just kind of blindly just, you know, sort of, well, I guess kind of loosely being involved in stuff that they can't really make a difference to.
And also, you know, I think you mentioned a very important thing, is that keeping it valuable. You know, you need to make sure if you do that executive engagement, you need to make sure it's valuable. And you know, hopefully your executive or whoever you bring from your side will bring value to the customer, and therefore the customer will want to talk to them again in the future, etc. But in the meeting, again, back to the preparation, more, you know, back to Darren's point earlier, is that, you know, if we really focus on the outcomes and we agree a certain set of outcomes, again, be honest. If you're an executive and you actually cannot follow up on all of these things, just say, look, I'll come back to the next meeting if we need to talk about X, Y, and Z. Right? You know, in the meantime, speak with Andre, and he will follow up on X, Y, and Z, right? So it's always about everything in business. From my perspective, and I think we do that in everything we do. That is just about being really open and transparent and honest. If you are honest with the customer, and you know, Pat was mentioning, you know, he's honest about how procurement processes work, etc. I think there's a much better way of doing business. And it's always, if you can't follow up on something, just say you can't. You know, someone else will do it. You know, or find a way, but just make sure you bring that value, but also then you deliver more on your promises. So agree on specific actions and who's going to do them.
I think one other point as well is just be conscious of how much of your discussion with that executive is for the consumption of the wider business. It can be quite easy to, you know, you might get an exciting indication of something that might be a little bit sensitive from talking to one of those people, and then you start talking to other people you're talking with at the project level, and suddenly you've, you know, kind of lost the trust of that person. I've seen that happen a few times before. You know, just be conscious of the fact that this person probably knows a lot more than the rest of the people you're talking to about the bigger picture, and that, you know, there's probably some level of trust in what he's sharing with you.
Is this about outsourcing IT operations?
Yeah, that could be a good one. Yeah, definitely don't go and blow that story too early. But yeah, I think just generally, just, you know, be sensitive of the fact that they're probably trusting you with information that's sensitive.
Sort of following up from a procurement perspective, you know, if you've had that meeting and there are some outcomes that are expected, then it is a case of, you know, just giving sort of updates, quite, you know, weekly updates to say, right, okay, based on what we discussed, this is where we've got to on this is where we've got to on that. You know, unfortunately we can't achieve this because, you know, our Amazon won't play ball with us, but I think, as you say, it's communication and honest communication.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. Okay, so are there any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's relevant to what the guys are saying potentially. So, guys, tell us about a time when you've had a very difficult meeting. What are the factors that went wrong, and how you potentially bring it back after some meeting?
Well, I don't know how many bad meetings.
Remember that meeting, Andre?
First time we met Pat at Telegraph. No, but I think the way to minimise, you know, the chances of a meeting going wrong is preparation. Back to Darren's point, right? So if you prepare as much as you can, and you know, as part of preparation, you anticipate, you know, difficult scenarios, and you already have some answers, etc. for that. And I'm talking about sales meetings. I mean, everyone has had, like, if you've worked on IT projects, etc. You know, escalations. That's a totally different matter. You know, that those were difficult by nature, right? But if you're talking about a sales meeting, by preparing well, you know, sort of decrease the chances of that happening. But you know, what happens in those meetings, sometimes it is unpredictable. You know, you might have someone that is very disruptive. There's a lot of people, you know. There's a lot of nice people around. There's a lot of not nice people around, and you know, and they are within our organisations, within our customers' organisations, etc. So I think if you prepare and if you anticipate those scenarios, the chances of that happening should be slimmer. But there are some times where people are just plain unpleasant, and from that you can't take any learnings. It's just
It
you
is
walk
what
away.
it
It is
is,
what
yeah.
it is, right?
Yeah.
So, but I've had a few, but again, where I've seen it going wrong, and then looking back at how could have gone right is all about preparation. If I had thought about these three things that I could have thought about before the meeting, then I would have avoided.
I've got some great horror stories I could tell. I've actually had a CISO of a large German investment bank turn his chair around and face away from me and refuse to talk to me for the rest of the meeting. That was a completely different story. But no, I think one thing that's important is to be mindful of the fact that the way you've planned the meeting is going to go isn't necessarily the way it's going to go, and especially when you're talking to senior, important people in the business. If you don't give them what they want quite quickly, you can quite quickly find yourself in hot water. So, don't, especially if they're a customer as well. If you're in a kind of account management type situation with them, you might have something really cool to go and talk to them. You're really excited about. They might want to talk to you about these 5 shitty tickets that they've had open with your support team for 2 years that you keep refusing to address. If you're not going to answer how those 5 tickets are going to get addressed, you're not going to get to talk to them about the other thing that's really important to you. So just be mindful of the fact that it's not always about your agenda. You kind of need to make sure that I always kind of believe in quid pro quo. Like I'm going to give you something you want, you're going to give me something I want, and that's the dynamic we should have in a kind of customer buyer relationship. It shouldn't be kind of too far in either direction. So just kind of bear that in mind, and hopefully no one will turn their chair around with it. So.
I would, from a procurement perspective and looking at it from a C-level perspective, I think you should always go in armed with, if you've got an hour in the diary with this person, go in armed with a 1 hour meeting, but also go in armed with what you can get through in half an hour, because 9 times out of 10 they're going to say, oh, I've only got half an hour. So yeah. So always go in there with 2 sets of expectations. One is that you've got an hour, one that you've got half an hour, because you'll find that their time, or they believe their time is more precious than yours. So
yeah, I think just one other point as well. Just do your best to understand the political landscape of the business. You might have a great reputation with somebody that they absolutely despise, and you might go in there kind of wearing that as your badge of honour and find yourself in hot water quite quickly as well. That's happened many times. Back at the wrong horse. So just bear that one in mind too. Do your homework. Make sure you know who you're talking to, and who their allies are.
All right. So, what is your best personal success story about reaching out to a hard exec, and what is the biggest mistake that you've ever made doing that?
I'm definitely not going first now.
I'm opting out, so that's all right.
We've kind of done the mistakes already, right? We can just talk about positive stuff. It's like feeling a bit traumatised.
We
I'm having
like to hear
flashbacks.
about your crazy stories of your mistakes.
Yeah. What you got?
We've had in terms of successes, I don't think. I think getting the meeting with a C-level exec is only the first step, right? I don't think that's the end of it. And sometimes, yes, look, if you reach out to people on LinkedIn, you're relevant. Maybe you get a meeting. Sometimes you get lucky. We've had people reaching out to C-level execs at Cloud Reach. Out of the blue, and they actually respond and say, "Yeah, I'd like to talk to you. So this is the right time. I'm looking at cloud, whatever." So getting that meeting, it is hard, but that's just half of the battle. I think what you need to do to be very successful, and there's a lot of successful examples, is getting the right resources, the right story, and the right preparation to actually impress that person to move forward. So I think from that perspective, I could list a million, but I think what can go wrong, again, back to the point we were making earlier, is not preparing, not understanding what the customer wants, and actually in the meeting not being flexible enough to go off plan, go off piste. You still have the same goals at the end of the meeting. You want some concrete follow-up actions, but actually if the customer wants to talk about something else, you need to be flexible and you need to cater for those. So I think the bad meetings, or the less successful meetings I've had over the years, is when you yeah, you don't prepare and you don't anticipate scenarios. For me, that's the key thing. If you do, you can always navigate around troubled waters.
I mean, I guess an example I could think of where it went really, really well. Previous employer, I was working with a large global management consulting organisation, and I actually met just randomly one of their kind of senior partners who had expertise in this really, really kind of niche field, and it was at the time kind of completely irrelevant to me, and I thought it was interesting, but never kind of thought there was an opportunity to make money out of it, to be frank, at the time. And then, as luck would happen, sort of 6 months down the line, the business I was working for acquired a company that had a technology that could kind of empower that, and just randomly kind of reached out to him again and introduced him to an exec on the company we'd acquired, and actually ended up building a joint venture together about a year down the line. So it kind of goes to show that if you've got the right thing at the right time for that person, and it's of interest, that it can really can really skyrocket. So didn't make any money out of it, but it was a good kind of the story of mine.
So that was your best success story and failure.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, Pat, we're gonna
Bittersweet.
go back to your gatekeeper. Have you thought of anything?
No. Just
All
not
right.
gonna happen.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it. Does anybody have questions? Yeah, go for it, sir.
Just a question on your opinion. Oh,
Oh.
sorry.
No, go on then.
Disastrous meeting. You invite a very famous French band to meet Andy Jassy. I guess you all know Andy Jassy.
Yeah, CEO of Amazon
Prepare
Web
all the
Services.
meeting, and everything has been orchestrated. And the first statement from the CIO of this French bank to Jassy is, if you need any help in operating your data center, we're prepared to teach you how to do it. And then you realize
That is a
you're going
difficult
to have a
conversation.
really, really bad day.
Nice.
That is one you would not anticipate if you're Andy Jassy. What is he going to ask me? Is he going to offer to run my data center?
Yeah.
That would not be on the list. That's a difficult one.
That's happened, and then
Fair enough. That can only go downhill from there.
you cannot prepare for that.
So yeah.
I'd like to get the panel's point of view on cold calling. So our business does a lot of networking and industry events. We try and generate those warm intros or get to decision makers directly. But there is the other side, which is for lots of leads that we have no intro in or can't necessarily find an intro in. What's your point of view on picking up the phone? Pat, you've sort of touched on it already, and attempting to actually speak to somebody face to face with a story that's going to potentially convert into at least a face to face meeting, or is it dead and you should just try alternatives?
From my perspective, I would always, my final comment on, he's not around, but if you send him an email and if it's of interest, he'll get back to you. So, it's worth having that call because you might be lucky and get someone who's
Having a bad day.
not having a bad day. But I think email with, short, sharp emails, or, we talked about LinkedIn earlier, if as long as you've done your work in terms of relevancy and what it means for a publishing organisation, then the emails do come in that actually do have some validity in terms of what you're trying to sell, and then I will actually engage with my sort of technology colleagues to actually look at that and say, is this something we want to pursue? Because we're always looking for ways to reduce risk, to save money, to sort of increase revenue. So if you've got a good story and you've got good technology, then it's not just the big boys, the SAPs and the Oracles and the IBMs. The Telegraph actually deals with a lot of sort of small to medium enterprises, and you've got to start somewhere. So.
Look, I'll give you my point of view on that. I think it depends on a few factors, but two of them very important. One is what sort of market you're trying to address. You're not going to get, you're very unlikely to get to the CIO of BP or Deutsche Bank or whatever by cold calling, right? So it depends on what type of market you're addressing. That's one. So in terms of size of customers you're addressing. The second one is, I think it's really important to focus on what solutions you provide. So I speak from from a CloudReach perspective. At CloudReach, we provide comprehensive solutions that are not very easy to we don't sell a product, so we transform platforms in something that is useful for a customer, and that can take all sorts of shapes and forms. So it's really difficult to say, yeah, I can help you innovate, but that's a really bit of a as a buzzword. Yeah, anyone will say that. If you sell a product, is a piece of software or a product that is really relevant for a certain industry or certain function within an organization, I think cold calling is a lot more effective. Now we've got some partners like I'll give an example of Cloud Health is a partner there. So they have a software that does cost management and spend management for AWS and Azure platforms, and that's a very specific function. If you say, right, I provide you something that gives you information that you can't get from anywhere else. On average, our customers save 20%, and this costs you 2 or 3% of your Amazon bill. It's really compelling. It's something you can get through to someone on a cold call and say, right, this is really specific. I understand what it is, and it's very simple. So I think what you sell is very. I think cold calling still works in that respect if it's something that you can really explain in a really short form. For us at CloudReach, to give you an example, it hasn't really worked that much because of what we sell is a little bit more complex, and selling telling people that we can enable innovation is a bit fine. Everyone will say that. But as a closing comment, I think about the C-suite and the decision maker and all that stuff. So in my role at CloudReach as looking after looking after our marketing team, I'm also a buyer. So there's maybe a bit stretched to call it. It's a bit of a stretch to call it a C-suite, but I'm a buyer in this space, and I think it is important to get to this to get to whoever signs off the budget, regardless of where you start, because there's people on my team that look at solutions, etc., and then at the end of the day, someone needs to sign off the budget. And actually, I do value when then that vendor would like to talk to me, and I want to evaluate them from that perspective. Someone else has looked at the feasibility of the project, the product, and how that brings value to us. But it is really important to get to whoever signs the budget. So I think again, back to the validation point, it's really important. But on the cold calling point, I think it really depends on what you do and who you're trying to target.
Well, and kind of the temperature. I mean, how cold are we talking? I think the days of getting a phone book and getting a switchboard number and trying to manoeuvre your way around a business, as much as it was great fun, those days are over, right? I think it might be cold to the customer in the sense they haven't spoken to you before, but there's so much information out there you can gather before you make that call, right? This is what I'm saying. You could gather enough information to kind of profile who the right, maybe a subset of people in the business that you've got a chance of having a meaningful conversation with, and that I think still has a role, absolutely, especially if you've got a nice, compelling, succinct proposition you can have a 2-minute conversation with. If you're a consulting organisation basically saying we can solve any problem you like, what problem have you got, right? That's not really going to work so much. You're going to find yourself in the water. But
and again, it's focusing on your time, right? So you have to see an hour spent cold calling, will it generate as much as an hour spent doing something else in demand generation, right? So that's what you need to analyze is the return on investment on the
the skill set of people doing it. So is it the founder making a call on behalf of their company, or is it someone they're employing who hasn't necessarily got that gravitas?
Or an automated message that tells you you've been in a car accident. They're the best. I love those ones. They're really good.
Exactly.
But I think you made a good point there around sort of exhibitions and conferences. I think if you've got, or if you're got a stand at an exhibition, or you're actually organising or talking at a conference, and it's relevant to that particular industry or that particular company, then sending out to C-suite or whoever sort of an email saying come along to this conference. It's free. As long as you say it's free, that's fine. This is what it's about, and this is how it's going to help you as an organisation. I think that's actually got a lot of resonance. I think certainly with our C-suite in terms of attending freebies and actually getting some education as well. So
So I just remembered something I thought would be quite interesting. So I spoke to a guy a couple of weeks ago who was a very senior salesperson that sort of been around for a number of years and worked at some very large organisations. And you know, cold calling the C-suite is never going to work right. You're not going to get through. So he's actually resorted in recent times to handwriting letters, and apparently he's got a really high success rate because who the hell gets a handwritten letter anymore? If you're like a CFO or something, you get a very nicely written letter and you open that up, you're probably going to have a look at that. You're going to be intrigued and at least open it up. And if somebody's taken the time to do that, I mean, a number of people will just throw it in the bin, but some people will actually just go, no, fair enough, you've actually gone out of your way to do that. I mean, look at it. And apparently, he was seeing some success with that. It was very, obviously again, it had some good level of background knowledge before. It wasn't just I'm Steve, it'd be great to chat about whatever it is I'm doing. It would, kind of be relevant to things that were going on in their business or something. But yeah, so I don't know, have a bit of food for thought. Get your pens out.
If you have,
if you can remember how to
and
write,
if good handwriting,
that's
that's
the key. The last time I used a pen, yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's it. If anybody else has questions. All right. Well, everybody go grab another beer or a glass of wine and have a little bit of networking. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, you don't press the bullshit.
He haggled me once.
No, right? I've been very well behaved. I fell asleep for most of it, to be honest, so. Joking. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. That's what we were going to do in the middle of it to Andre, but they were going to do it from back there, and then they shoved it up to me, and I'm like, yeah.
I can only think of about 5 times you could have done it to him.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
No, ladies first. Tell me to grab anything there.
Would you grab that extra wine that's left over? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I think this is great because it's doing on a daily basis, and that's great for our kind of our regular contacts and customers. And then we've got over here, we've got this kind of list of leads that we're just we're constantly going. We need to do something with that. Okay, push Cam.
Yep, thank you.
I found though, if you work on, if you take the time to really work on the script, some of the and have them for the account at really low levels. You guys take some time to target some of the
Kind of schedule a call
directors.
with one of our
A
founders
lot
to
of
call
times
you.
there can be, but there's a lot of there's a lot of depends on out there.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. Yeah.
Give you a hand.
Yeah, it was another debate we're having. We bought people's house.
Go and grab a beer.
You
You helped the last time. I remember you helping the kids last time.
All I helped
Go
myself was
get a beer. Go on.
it's hot, right?
Go get a beer.
Everyone wants a beer. I know how meetups work.
The aircon
If
is
I
on.
am
job is to put the chairs
I'll
together.
Thank you for that.
but then I'm not.
The challenge that's really difficult. Company I've worked with several times is called Insight Square.
That we don't regret that. It's very hot.
Inside sales team. There you go.
Where are they going?
Not even hold the drive right through.
Yeah, definitely not one there.
Yeah, this is the. This is
That's fine.
this is a very and we're.
And yeah, Darren.
Contact.
Good night, yeah?
Thank you very much.
So that's why
I'll get you both today.
Yeah, the chance of that filter or ruining your chance to sell to them becomes really low. But if you can start to create a groundswell, so you guys get this influence.
No,
But it does. I mean, like I said, I'm
All good?
prospect. Whatever, right? Prospect is a better
we've certainly had some success. You know, when we have the points you made about it, we've done the research, we found the person, and you just have you have those magical calls, and you feel like, you know what, this is exactly what we're looking for right now. Great, let's come on next week, and it's led to some really good business for us. But the majority of those points and what we sell is very timely. So we design interactive 3D models of future space.
Oh, yeah.
So we work with kind of architects and developers, city councils, sort of regenerating kind of areas in the master plan. So it's used a lot by, say, developers selling 20 or 50% of their stock off plan, because they can show potentially how some kind of apartments will look like in a year's time, on the foundation level, or helps architects sell designs, or whatever it might be. So it's really good, very effective within a window of opportunity. And it's finding, but that window of opportunity is public by the very nature of the development is private and that information is guarded. So it's finding those individuals working on those kinds of projects, very, very limited amount of public information, and then going, hey, let's do this and help you. So it's just all this kind of mix.
Yeah. See, that's very different because in the software world, you can really use SEC filings, annual reports, and and what I've done a lot of times is have some of my senior people walk through there, or even myself, run through the report, and then say, okay, here are the 4 bullet points you'll use in your message, But yeah, in that case, that won't work.
But it's
in your report, we're going to develop something.
Well,
Okay,
but the events are great.
This is a good city to be in for that.
It's great.
Type of business.
Yeah, it's going very well. And so when it comes to the face-to-face, it's great because the nature of the product is interactive. So I don't really have to say anything.
Just show it and done.
They play with it. So it's great when we're having these kinds of interactions.
Now, have you considered going after like the investor community at all?
Well,
selling to the investor community, then Mike basically tell their architects and builders.
Yeah, in fact, we should do more of that. We work with a few asset managers actually who control the real estate.
So it's a real testament.